There's an old saying folks in Rosebridge still whisper over coffee and gossip: jealousy doesn't just destroy what it can't have, it burns what it can't reach. That saying fits the Kent family almost too perfectly. Lorelai Kent had spent 12 quiet years building a life most women would envy. She and her husband Cody Kent ran a modest landscaping business on the outskirts of Charlotte, North Carolina. He handled the crews, she managed the books and the customers, who always asked for Mrs. Kent's touch. Their small white farmhouse sat on 2 acres of trimmed green, with rose bushes that bloomed thick every spring and a front porch swing that had known more laughter than arguments. At 36, Lorelai wasn't the sort of woman people noticed in a crowd, but she was the kind they trusted. The kind who remembered birthdays, who packed lunches with folded notes, who kept faith in both her marriage and her patience. Her younger sister Veda French was the opposite. 27, restless and impossibly sure of herself, Veda lived in Charlotte proper, glittering nightlife, expensive dresses, and men who never stayed past sunrise. She came to the farmhouse every weekend, claiming she missed real food, though Lorelai knew she came mostly for attention. At first Cody didn't mind. He saw Veda as a kid sister, laughing off her teasing compliments and her habit of touching his arm when she spoke. But over time, her visits grew longer. The glances lingered, compliments turned softer, personal. Lorelai noticed small shifts: the way Veda sat beside him instead of across, how she volunteered to help wash dishes just to stand near him. It wasn't until the second week of April that Lorelai felt the hairline crack beneath their perfect picture. It started with a scent. Cody came home one evening smelling faintly of vanilla musk, the kind Veda always wore. He said a client's assistant had hugged him goodbye. Lorelai smiled, said nothing, and set the table as though her stomach hadn't tightened. Then, a week later, while cleaning his truck, she found a folded receipt tucked in the glove compartment. It was from Stone and Birch Cafe, 2 dinners, dated last Thursday, the same night Cody had claimed he was meeting the new supplier. When Lorelai quietly asked about it, Cody looked genuinely puzzled. "Oh, that was with Veda and her friend," he said easily. "They dropped by my office, wanted to grab lunch. It wasn't a big deal." Veda confirmed it with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "Just catching up with my favorite brother-in-law," she'd said, leaning her chin on her palm like a cat testing boundaries. Lorelai let it go, but unease began to take root. Soon other things changed. Cody started keeping his phone face down during dinner. He became quieter, distracted. Veda, meanwhile, called more often, asking casual questions. "Is he home yet?" or "What time does he finish work?" as though she were tracking his schedule. One Saturday, Veda arrived at the farmhouse with her best friend, Elena Grant, a glossy-haired woman who owned a small events firm downtown. Elena was charming in that effortless way that drew people in. Over lunch, she complimented Lorelai's cooking, asked innocent questions about Cody's business, and laughed a little too loudly when he spoke. Something in that laughter felt rehearsed. Later that afternoon, as Lorelai washed the dishes, she heard them outside on the porch, Veda whispering, Elena giggling, and Cody's polite voice trying to shift the conversation. When she peeked through the kitchen window, she saw Elena hand Cody her phone, angling it for a selfie. He looked uncomfortable but smiled briefly out of politeness. By Sunday morning, that picture was posted on Elena's social media page, captioned "Business Brainstorming with My Favorite Couples Man." The comments poured in, laughing emojis, teasing remarks, and Veda liked every one of them. Lorelai didn't say a word, but the air in the farmhouse changed. In bed that night, Cody rolled toward her, trying to close the quiet gap that had formed, but she stayed still, eyes open in the dark. He kissed her shoulder and whispered, "You know I'd never betray you." She believed him, or wanted to. But belief, she was learning, was a fragile thing. A few days later, her mother-in-law mentioned seeing Cody at the Lakeside Cafe with 2 young ladies. Lorelai just smiled and said, "I'm sure there's an explanation," but her heart had already gone cold. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lorelai opened her laptop and began scrolling through Elena's social media page again. The photo of her husband was gone, deleted. A new post appeared instead, a shot of a wine glass with the caption, "Some secrets taste sweeter when shared." And in the comments, Veda had left 3 flame emojis. That was when Lorelai understood something was very wrong, not with her marriage, but with the people closest to her. She just didn't know yet that the woman sitting across her dinner table every Sunday was crafting a trap, one designed to make her husband look like a liar, and herself look like the victim. But soon enough, that trap would spring back on its maker, and the humiliation would echo louder than the laughter that built it. By late April, Rosebridge was alive with blooming dogwoods, and the air smelled of renewal. But inside the Kent farmhouse, something was decaying in silence. Lorelei Kent went through her days as if nothing had changed. She packed lunches, tended the roses, and waved to Cody when his pickup disappeared down the long gravel drive each morning. But every small detail now came with a question mark. She began to notice how often Veda's name came up. Cody would mention her offhandedly. "Your sister stopped by the office with her friend again," or "Veda said she might have a business contact for us."
Always casual, always innocent.
It was almost clever, almost. What Lorelei didn't know yet was that Veda and Alana Grant were meeting privately, whispering through plans that could ruin a marriage. Veda had convinced herself she wasn't doing anything evil, just proving something. She'd always believed Cody's loyalty was performative, that no man could stay faithful if given the right temptation, so she decided to test it. Alana, ever hungry for excitement and attention, agreed to be the bait. The plan was simple: catch Cody in a compromising situation, photograph it and show Lorelei the evidence. Veda wanted to appear as the devastated sister who tried to protect her. And when the dust settled, when Lorelei left her marriage, she could finally have the man she'd been secretly pining for. Cruel as it was, it made perfect sense in Veda's self-serving logic. The first stage began at Cody's office. Alana pretended to drop by with lunch for the whole crew. She handed him a sandwich, wrapped neatly in parchment, smiled, and told him she admired how hard he worked. She angled her phone as he thanked her, capturing a mid-laugh frame that made him look far more engaged than he was. Then came the chance encounters, running into him at the grocery store, waving from across the gym parking lot, asking for advice about her company's landscaping needs. Each time, she slipped her phone out for a selfie or voice memo, keeping Veda updated through messages. "He's polite but distant. Might take longer than we thought. Don't worry, I'll get the proof." Veda urged her on. "Make it believable," she'd text. Something she can't ignore. Meanwhile, Lorelei noticed her husband's small changes. He started coming home with tension behind his eyes, the kind that comes from guilt or confusion. He mentioned Alana once too often. One night, after dinner, Lorelei found him scrolling through his phone with a heavy sigh. When she asked, he said quietly, "I think your sister's friend has a crush on me. She's been dropping hints." Lorelei froze, watching his honest discomfort. "Did you tell her to stop?" He nodded. "I was polite, but I made it clear I'm married. It's awkward though. She's part of your sister's circle." That was when Lorelei's heart split into two halves, one that still trusted, and another that was quietly starting to prepare for war. Days later, she got her first taste of what Veda had been brewing. A photo came to her phone, sent from an unknown number. It showed Cody and Alana seated together at Stone and Birch Cafe, his hand resting near hers on the table. The caption read, "You deserve to know." Her pulse spiked. But then she noticed the details: the shadow of another person in the reflection of the cafe window, the awkward angle that cut off half of Cody's expression. It was staged. She could feel it in her bones. Still, the ache remained. She didn't tell him about the message. Instead, she spent the next few days in silence, watching. She studied every small behavior. How long he stayed out, whether he checked his phone before bed, how often he looked at her with eyes full of guilt rather than affection. Then one afternoon, she went to visit her sister unannounced. Veda wasn't home, but her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. Lorelei's intention was simple, to borrow her charger, but curiosity turned the handle. There it was, a folder on the desktop titled Proof. Inside, dozens of photos, Cody and Alana talking in the parking lot, leaving the cafe, a frame of him opening her car door, all cropped and filtered to look intimate. Lorelei's breath caught, but the last message thread sealed it. Veda and Alana's conversation. "Veda, make sure you get him to smile this time." "Alana, he's catching on. He's too decent." "Veda, then fake it. Sit closer. He'll pull away, but I can crop that." The bile rose in Lorelei's throat. She closed the laptop and left without a sound. That evening she made dinner like nothing happened. Mashed potatoes, grilled chicken, soft candlelight. Cody thanked her, touched her hand, and said he missed how quiet their evenings used to be. And as he said it, she looked at him and saw not the man being accused, but the man being hunted. Something hard and cold settled in her chest. Vida wasn't testing loyalty anymore. She was trying to destroy it, and Lorelai knew then, she wouldn't confront her sister yet. She'd let the play continue, just long enough for every actor to believe they were winning, because sometimes, silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, silence is the sound of a trap being built. Lorelai Kent had always been the quiet one in her family, but that spring, her silence changed texture. It stopped sounding like patience, and started sounding like calculation. Every night after Cody drifted off to sleep, she'd sit at the oak desk near the window with a mug of black coffee and a small spiral notebook. On the first page, she wrote 2 words in block letters. The proof, underneath it. She began logging everything: times, screenshots, dates, messages. The next day, while Cody worked the landscaping crews, Lorelai logged into the family's shared cloud account. Cody wasn't tech-savvy, but Vida had always used his email to send work ideas. Now Lorelai searched through sent folders, trash bins, photo backups, every corner that stored fragments of digital life. That's where she found the seed of her sister's undoing. A folder mislabeled quotes for clients contained cropped images. Her husband's smile beside a wine glass, his hand blurred in mid-gesture. Elena's face tilted close. And threaded in the metadata were original timestamps that didn't match the captions Vida had posted online. Lorelai printed everything. She numbered each page like a detective assembling a case file. Then she started watching Vida differently. The following weekend, her sister showed up in her usual fashion: perfume first, laughter second, lies third. But Lorelai noticed something. Vida could never quite meet her eyes anymore. Over coffee, Lorelai mentioned casually, "Mom's thinking about hosting a little family dinner next month. Maybe we could hold it here, make it easier on her." Vida smiled too quickly. "Of course. That'll be fun. Perfect." A date was set without a fight. That same evening, Lorelai visited an old friend, Randall Hayes, who managed security systems for local businesses. She told him she wanted to record a family celebration for sentimental reasons. Within days, 2 small pin cams were installed, one above the mantel facing the dining table, another near the chandelier. Randall handed her a flash drive, with automatic backup. "You're sure this is just family?" he'd asked. She smiled faintly. Family enough. From then on, Lorelai's days looked ordinary, but felt electric. While Cody ran errands, she recorded short voice memos describing what she'd discovered. She saved them in a hidden folder on her phone titled Garden Tips. Each note began the same way. Day 1, gathering soil samples, but ended with precise accounts of what her sister and Elena were plotting. Then fate delivered the confirmation she needed. Late one night, Cody received a text while showering. The phone buzzed across the counter, lighting up with Elena's name and the words, "Heard you were alone tonight." Lorelai stared at it until the water stopped running. When he emerged, towel around his waist, she handed him the phone. He frowned, typed something back, and showed her the reply. "I'm married, Elena, don't text me again." He looked shaken. "She's been weird lately," he admitted. "I didn't want to upset you." Her chest ached with a mixture of relief and rage, because now she knew, Cody wasn't part of the plan. He was the bait. The trap was built around his decency. Over the next few weeks, she refined her own trap with the same precision her sister had used to build hers. She called the event, the Gratitude Dinner, an evening to celebrate family, loyalty, and second chances. She invited her in-laws, Vida, Elena, and even a few cousins who loved gossip more than dessert. On the surface, it sounded wholesome. In truth, it was an ambush dressed in candlelight. Lorelai spent hours designing a slideshow titled Memories That Made Us. The first half contained old family photos, birthdays, holidays, childhood smiles. The second half, seamlessly hidden behind a single click, contained the damning material, screenshots of Veda's messages, the cropped photos with restored timestamps, the voice notes where Alana admitted, "He's too decent for this, but Veda says we just need one good picture." When the final file was saved, she sat back in her chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in weeks. The house was still, except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the hallway clock. That's when the phrase came to her. The line that would one day define this entire ordeal. "She turned my husband's faithfulness into a trap, and walked straight into it herself." The night before the dinner, Lorelai rehearsed everything. She imagined the moment the screen would flicker from nostalgia to truth, the way Veda's face would blanch, the gasp from the table when the evidence scrolled. She imagined Cody's stunned silence, her parents' disbelief, and then the stillness that would follow once the truth settled like ash. No yelling, no chaos, just exposure, clean and final. By sunrise, every detail was in place. Cameras armed, slideshow preloaded, invitations confirmed. The table gleamed with polished silver. 12 chairs circled a storm no one else saw coming. And as Lorelai stood by the window, watching dawn spill over the roses she'd planted years ago, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, the silence ends." Saturday arrived golden and quiet, the kind of day that made Rosebridge look like a painting. The Kent farmhouse smelled of cinnamon and roast turkey, and sunlight poured through the kitchen window, catching the silverware like glints of waiting judgment. By late afternoon, the guests began to arrive. Lorelai greeted each one with practiced warmth, the in-laws with a polite hug, her mother with a reserved smile. She even welcomed Veda French with a soft "You look lovely tonight," though her tone was cool enough to chill the room. Veda, wrapped in a crimson dress too bold for a family dinner, preened as if she were the star of the evening. Trailing behind her came Alana Grant, dressed to match, her perfume thick enough to turn heads. She clutched a bottle of wine, like a peace offering, and said cheerfully, "For the hostess with the most taste." "Thank you," Lorelai replied. "Set it right on the table. We'll open it together." Cody came down the stairs, moments later, buttoning his sleeve cuffs, clearly uneasy. He'd been cautious ever since that last text from Alana, but Lorelai had told him she wanted to clear the air. He didn't know that tonight wasn't about peace, it was about proof. The dinner began with small talk. Plates clinked, laughter fluttered and died in waves. The tension was thick enough to chew. Halfway through dessert, Lorelai rose from her chair. "Before we finish," she said softly, "I've prepared something special. A little reflection on family. What we build, what we break, and what we betray." Her words hung heavy, and before anyone could respond, she dimmed the lights. The projector came alive. At first it was sweet, a slideshow of childhood photos. Little Veda blowing out candles beside a young Lorelai. Cody and Lorelai at their wedding, covered in sunlight. A collective sigh filled the room. Then without warning, the next image appeared. A high-resolution photo of Cody at the cafe table with Alayan, her hand angled toward him. Someone gasped. "Oh," Veda murmured, feigning surprise. "Lorelai maybe," but Lorelai's voice cut through the air. "Let's keep watching." Another slide. The same photo, only this time, zoomed out. The reflection in the cafe window clearly showed Veda's face in the background, holding a phone. The guests stirred. Then came screenshots. Text exchanges projected in bold letters across the living room wall. "Veda, make sure you get his smile." "Alayan, he's not taking the bait." "Veda, then fake it. We only need one shot." Gasps rippled around the table. Cody's mother covered her mouth. Cody himself stared, white-faced, as if seeing his marriage through someone else's lie. Veda shot up from her chair, voice trembling. "Lorelai, you don't understand. It wasn't like that." But Lorelai pressed a button on the remote, and a short video began to play. Veda's voice again, recorded in Alayana's apartment. "She acts so perfect. Let's see how perfect she looks when her husband's on camera with another woman. A picture lasts forever." A pin could have dropped in that silence. Alayana broke first. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears welled up. "She made me do it," she cried. "She cried?" Veda said it was harmless, that you'd probably forgive him after a few months. "Enough," Veda hissed, rounding on her friend. "You were in it too." But Lorelai was calm, her tone almost surgical. "You both were. The only difference is, one of you has the decency to admit it." The humiliation burned like wildfire. Veda's crimson cheeks blazed against the flickering screen. She turned toward Cody, desperate now. "I did it for you. I wanted you to see who she really is." But Cody's face hardened, voice low and trembling. "Who she is," he said. "She's the woman you tried to destroy to get to me." Veda's eyes filled with panic. "You can't talk to me like that." "I can," Lorelai interrupted. "And you'll listen, because everything you tried to twist, I've untwisted right here in front of the people whose approval you crave most." Her parents looked stricken. Her father shook his head slowly, disappointment deep as grief. You've brought shame on yourself, Veda. On all of us. The room swelled with murmurs. Alena quietly gathered her purse, muttering apologies that no one cared to hear. Cody's mother refused to look at Veda as she wept. When Lorelai turned the lights back on, no one touched their dessert. The candles flickered weakly over faces too pale for comfort. Lorelai exhaled, steady, victorious. But not smug. You see, she said. Voice measured. She turned my husband's faithfulness into a trap, and walked straight into it herself. Then she lifted her glass. To the truth, she said softly. It doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it only needs to be seen. She clinked her glass gently against her own, the sound slicing through the stunned silence. That was the last night anyone in Rosebridge ever saw the French sisters in the same room again. The following morning the quiet in Rosebridge felt heavier than any storm. The guests had left in stunned silence the night before, and by dawn the whole town was whispering about the dinner that ended with a confession, a breakdown, and a sister's pride shattering like porcelain. Lorelai Kent woke early, brewed coffee, and stood by the kitchen window, watching dew gather on the roses she'd planted 10 years earlier. The same roses that had framed every family photograph, every Christmas card, every illusion of peace. Cody came downstairs quietly. His eyes were red, his face hollow. He didn't touch his coffee. I don't even know what to say, he murmured. She didn't look at him right away. Say nothing, just learn from the silence. He nodded, shame pressing into his shoulders. Though he'd been faithful, he hadn't been blind. He'd seen the flirtations, felt the shift in boundaries, and done nothing early enough to stop them. In the mirror of that night, he saw his weakness for what it was, the kind of passivity that lets evil fester. By noon calls began to pour in. Lorelai's mother was the first. Baby, she said softly, voice thick with tears. Your father hasn't stopped pacing since last night. He said he never thought he'd see one daughter humiliate another that way. Lorelai answered calmly. Humiliation isn't what I gave her. Truth is. What she does with it, that's her punishment. Word spread faster than wildfire. Within hours Veda's name was on everyone's lips, from the hair salon on Maple Street to the church steps. The whispers weren't cruel, they were cutting in a quieter way, pity wrapped in judgment. Did you hear? She staged the whole affair herself. Poor Lorelai. Imagine being betrayed by your own blood. Alena Grant, fearing the fallout, came clean publicly. She confessed in a group chat with mutual friends, admitting to being part of a cruel plan, and apologizing to Lorelai directly through text. Lorelai never replied, but she saved the message. Some truths didn't need responses, they only needed witnesses. Veda, however, handled her downfall like a cornered animal. She showed up at the farmhouse 2 days later, makeup streaked, eyes swollen. Please, she begged from the porch. Can we talk? Lorelai stepped outside, closing the door behind her so Cody wouldn't hear. The morning air carried a damp chill, heavy with unspoken memories. Talk about what? Lorelai asked. I made a mistake, Veda whispered. I wanted to prove he wasn't perfect, that you weren't perfect. You always had everything. Lorelai's voice was steady. Everything? I had a husband who worked until he forgot how to rest. A home I maintained while you chased attention. If that's everything, I'd hate to see what nothing looks like. Tears spilled down Veda's cheeks. I lost everything. My job, my friends. Mom won't even take my calls. You lost what you built, Lorelai said softly. And you built it out of lies. Veda reached forward, desperate. Can you at least tell them I'm sorry? Lorelai took a step back. No. They need to hear that from you. You'll earn forgiveness the same way I earned peace. One truth at a time. Then she turned and walked inside, closing the door gently. Not slammed, just final. That evening she and Cody sat at the table together, for the first time since the dinner. Between them lay a manila envelope, divorce papers. He looked up at her, pain in his eyes. Lorelai, don't do this, please. I didn't touch her, I swear. I know, she said, voice calm. But knowing isn't enough. Trust isn't something I can hand back like a misplaced key. It has to grow again, and maybe it will, just not under this roof. He dropped his gaze, signing where she pointed. There were no shouts, no tears. Only the quiet dignity of a woman reclaiming her power. Weeks passed. Lorelai sold the landscaping business, keeping her half of the proceeds. She moved into a smaller house, closer to downtown, quieter, simpler, with no ghosts of laughter turning into suspicion. She started taking evening classes at Piedmont Community College, studying interior design. It wasn't about reinvention. It was about remembering who she was before betrayal made her smaller. As for Vida, she moved out of town, finding a clerical job 2 counties over. People said she'd stopped wearing bright colors and started attending church alone on Sundays. The hum of her laughter was gone. One evening in August, Lorelai received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo, one taken the night of the infamous dinner. It showed her standing by the projector, head held high, candlelight painting her face in quiet defiance. On the back, in Veda's handwriting, was a single sentence: "You were right. Silence can set traps." Lorelai smiled faintly, tucked the photo into her drawer, and went out to her porch. The sun was dipping behind the trees, gold bleeding into rose. She sipped her tea and whispered to herself, "Not every silence means surrender. Some silences are setting traps." And with that, the story of the Kent sisters ended, not with vengeance burning wild, but with justice cooling slow. Because in the end, what destroyed Veda wasn't Lorelai's revenge, it was her own need to touch what wasn't hers. And the silence she once mocked, it became the sound of her downfall.